Deep in the forests of North America, a creature is said to exist. A creature that people are encountering. With far too many reports to ignore, there are elements of truth behind these accounts that mankind can no longer ignore.
Breaking news out of Texas, Bigfoot is real.
Could a breeding population of large, upright, hairy hominids really exist in North America? Or is there something more paranormal at work here, deep in the woods? If just one footprint, one wood knock, or one howl is real, then man's understanding of primate evolution would be changed forever. Join the Catskill Appalachian Research Collective as they delve further into the mysteries of Bigfoot and other paranormal phenomena through the eyes of witnesses, investigators, critics, and skeptics. Join us as we look to discover what lurks from behind tall trees.
I don't mean to sound pompous, but I love that intro. I really do.
Brendan worked his magic, man. I think I watched it too.
Did that do anything for you, Shane?
I gotta tell you, that's one of the coolest intros out there, period.
Nice.
Yeah.
See? We aim to please, Shane.
Yeah, like it never gets old. Every time I listen to it, I kind of get like chills sometimes going down my back. So,
Yeah,
I mean, the fact that I wrote the dialogue might have something to do with it. But
There you go. Nice.
But yeah, here we are. Yeah, man, Shane, thanks again for hopping on. Definitely excited to have you. So when we were in the lobby, we were talking about how you guys at the Olympic Project, you primarily have your three main honey holes, I guess you could say, areas that you own. Is it kind of like you guys just go to them different times of the year, or does it depend on like what kind of activity? How do you guys determine that? I meant to ask that.
Yeah, so Olympic Project's a little bit broad. So we have members in different parts of the state where we monitor. Like Chris Spencer monitors. It's basically his area, but there's another adjacent area. Pardon me, that we all kind of monitor down there in southwestern Washington. And so we have kind of individuals that monitor these areas, and we monitor them year round, with different techniques, whether it's out there actually exploring or camping, but also a lot of times it's just with like long-term audio units and a little bit of trail camera work. So it's not a seasonal thing. We'll do it year round, snow, wind, sun, you name it. It's year round, and we're not ambulance chasers. I know a lot of people today, and especially in the past, used to, here's a report, zoom over there. Here's a report, zoom there. We focus in on these specific areas year after year after year, and just monitor them, see what the known wildlife is doing, what the weather patterns are, and if there's anything ambiguous via audio or visually, a visual find. That's kind of what we document.
Have you noticed much in terms of, like you mentioned, weather patterns? I'm a huge supporter of the whole rain theory, kind of how rainfall coincides with Bigfoot sightings. I've taken maps of Bigfoot sightings in different states, literally compare them to rain maps that show how much rainfall states get, and in almost every single state I've done it in, the areas of the state that have the highest levels of rainfall also happen to have the highest concentration of sightings. And it's not even in states where that are kind of like in the middle on it. Even in some of the wettest states in the country. Now, down south, it's not really known for Bigfoot. I mean, it kind of is as of late. But what types of patterns or correlations, just in regards to like rainfall, have you noticed with Bigfoot activity?
Yeah, it's a good question. I agree with you. I think there's a lot to do with the rainfall. I really do. I think rainfall plays a huge role for obvious reasons, because if you have rain, you have growth. So in a lot of these areas, like in Western Washington, we get an ungodly amount of rain, and there are a lot of reports in these areas. And then, like you said, if you look at maps throughout the country, if you throw the annual precipitation in some of these areas over Sasquatch sightings, it stands out, and you can't get around that. It just stands out. So I think the rain plays a big part. It's anyone's guess as to absolutely why. Does Sasquatches prefer wetter environments? I particularly think so. But why the rain? Like I said, you got abundance of rivers, lakes, and whatnot in these areas, and then you have abundance of growth. But then on top of that, you have an abundance of wildlife in these areas. So I mean, if Sasquatch is you'll find deer in a lot of these areas, but you're going to find a lot more deer in some of these wetter areas, especially with the amount of natural growth. The food sources are tremendous, and then with the water and the tree growth and the plant growth, you have a lot of concealment. You can hide a lot easier. You're not going to hide so much in a desert or a dry environment. And not that Sasquatch doesn't visit those areas or pass through them, but I think your chances are, it just stands to reason where you get a lot of these, a lot of the animals, including Sasquatch reports in these areas. The rain has to play a role, in my opinion. Yeah.
Sure. So, Charlie, were we about to say something, or?
No, I'll wait until the next. If you can finish your thought, and then I'll ask something if you want.
Cool. Yeah, no, that makes sense. And one of the things that really got it for me, I looked at two states that are on not really different ends of the spectrum, but Connecticut out of all states. It's a really small state, not really known for Bigfoot sightings. It has some, but I look at a rain map, and even though it's the sources I've read, I think it's number 10 in terms of wettest states in the country. It's got this. It's pretty much really evenly distributed. There's I think the chart I read, blue signified where the areas where you get most of the rainfall, and Connecticut just had this little blip in the northwest part of the state. Incidentally, it turns out to be Litchfield County, where the majority of the Bigfoot sightings happen to be.
Interesting.
Yeah, I looked at Florida, and which is definitely one of the wetter, swampier states. My figuring was, if there was high rainfall, that should mean, if it correlates, Bigfoot sightings should be more spread throughout the state. But no, the areas, even though it's a wetter area, the areas that had the highest level of rainfall, that's where a lot of the Bigfoot sightings were clustered around. I did I don't mean to filibuster here, but I did a bit of a deep dive too, just in reports involving an actual sighting in New York, New Jersey, some in Pennsylvania, and where the data was available, where I could get an exact data, precise location. And I think over 3/4 of those reports, over 75% of them, in the area within 5 days leading up to it. 5 days might be a bit of a stretch looking back, but it rained or there was some type of precipitation within the previous 120 or so hours leading up to that sighting. So I just think it's a really, really interesting narrative that doesn't really get the attention it deserves. Having said that, and just tell me if you agree, I'm sure the conditions really aren't favorable to regular humans like us who are used to being dry and comfortable, everything like that. You don't really see many people going out of their way to traverse through the wilderness while it's raining or right after it rains. I freak out when I get water in my shoes or something like that. So
yeah, I happen to absolutely love the rain. Growing up in Scotland, I've been around rain my whole life, other than that spell I spent in California, Southern California, where there's no rain. But up here in the Pacific Northwest, the vast majority of our field work is in rain, whether it's just the environment's wet. I mean, the environment up here is always wet. We practically live in a rainforest, even where I live up here in Mason County, Washington. But yeah, there's no getting around the rain. And if I didn't like the rain, or the Olymp project as a whole didn't like the rain, we'd get nothing done, because it rains up here almost 9 months out of the year, and everything's always wet. So you just adapt to it. And I think there's value to, a lot of people, and I understand this around the country, can't get out in certain environments. It's the snow, it's freezing cold. Up here, we're fairly temperate. So I can get out quite frequently, but it probably will be in the rain. and that's why my equipment reflects my passion, and I'm adapted and readily available to hit the woods at any time, and in all seasons. But the rain up here it can be tremendous. So yeah.
Hey, speaking of, since we're talking about so much rain and water, I just over the weekend I was watching that thing on, I think it was on History Channel, with those guys that had that do the eDNA when they take the water samples. Have you ever had those guys come up to visit the site, or have you worked with them before?
No, I'm not. There's been a couple of different shows. I'm not familiar with the one you're speaking of, but definitely not had anybody specific come out and do any eDNA work other than Dr. Meldrum. I mean, collecting samples.
Right.
But that's definitely going forward. Having learned what I've learned last couple of years, I hope to get specifically water samples. I like the soil samples, but they degrade over 48 hours, which when I first got involved with the whole process of eDNA, I had no idea, which was my bad, kind of a dumb thing. I should have done my homework. But now going forward, I think the best opportunity to possibly get something of value is going to be some sort of water sample, more like a stagnant, not like a river or something more stagnant, where it kind of sits there and you get this poultry dish of different things. But not had anybody, to answer your question, no, not had those individuals you speak of up here. No.
Well, eDNA is a fairly new scientific concept. Like, it's pretty much in its infancy now compared to all the other processes that are out there. Is that an accurate assessment of it, or?
Oh, absolutely. It's been around for a long time, but it's constantly being adapted. It's constantly growing. There's different labs popping up with different methods, different collection methods, different ways of analyzing that eDNA. And I'm definitely no expert on eDNA, but it's definitely in its infancy. And there's a lot of papers I've been reading last couple of years where, there's pros and cons, but it does have its value. And I think specifically, talking about unknowns, it has its value with the Sasquatch phenomena. And I expect that over time, not only will the price come down, but the amount of labs, not just in the United States, but Canada, Australia, Germany. There's a lot of labs that are very astute in working out different methods, bringing the cost down, but also really bringing out in the forefront eDNA and the different methods of capturing that eDNA. And I think, like I said before, water is something I've been interested in, collecting water samples. Not done it yet. I haven't found an area where I had the reason to collect water per se. It's been mainly kind of soil samples, but I'm kind of going to steer away from that unless something's fresh and I can have a plan, to get that sample from A to B in a timely fashion with hopefully no contamination, and hopefully I won't be the one collecting it. I hope to get somebody in academia outside of the Bigfoot world to collect that stuff. If I come across something, back off and let someone collect it. But it is a process. It's a learning curve. It's been a learning curve for me. It's been a learning curve for the Olympic project. I'm very much the optimist. I think the future is bright for this sort of stuff, and we're going to utilize it when available, and hopefully come up with ideas of who to reach out to, when to reach out to them, and hopefully it's cost effective.
So this is kind of veering away from the Bigfoot topic, but it is pertinent. Speaking of you being from Scotland, didn't a couple of years ago, didn't they do was it an eDNA test where they took water samples out of Loch Ness and they identified all these species, or like a bunch of eel species, everything like that? I remember Ken Gerhard, we had him on in season 1, and we touched on that a little bit. And he said, they didn't find anything, prehistoric or anything that they wanted to, but he did say that like 25% of the samples were unknown.
Right.
With that said, though, you definitely know a lot more about DNA collection and analysis than I do. When something comes back as unknown or inconclusive, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's like an unknown species of animal, or would you be able to just elaborate just on what that means?
Honestly, not truthfully. I can tell you that basically, from my understanding, you can get a lot of unknowns. You can get a lot of inconclusive data. It doesn't mean that there's an unknown it mainly means it's just inconclusive, that they just can't identify it. That either could be contamination, it could be degrading samples. They just can't identify it. Doesn't mean that something's absolutely unknown, it's just they can't identify it. And like I said, that's for a number of reasons. It could be how the sample was collected, how long, like for example, with certain soil samples, if you take just for example, say you have an area, you're going to experiment, do eDNA on this area. Say it's on hamsters, and you got hamsters in a terrarium and there's soil in there. You leave those hamsters in there for a week or a couple of days, and then you take those hamsters out. Well, after 48 hours, 48 to 72 hours, that sample will degrade over time, and in some cases, they won't be able to tell what was in that soil sample, depending on the degradation on that. So I would assume, same thing with Loch Ness. There's probably there could be some actual unknowns in that lake, but you have to go with the data and just and assume that those unknowns are just either just not identifiable at that time, and maybe with future tests done, collection samples, that maybe they'll come and identify everything in that body of water. And that goes for eDNA in general. When you're collecting this stuff, there's it's not a perfect science by far. It's not a perfect science. There's a lot of room for error, but it is getting better and better, and it does have its benefits. I mean, we all know that. I mean, they can identify a lot of stuff. One of the universities I've been looking at is in the UK, United Kingdom, and they mainly deal with aquatic eDNA tests, and a lot of what they do is around newts. And they go around, they do newt studies, and they're kind of the experts on newts. And a lot of these labs are experts in certain eDNA field studies, but not across the board. It's when you're looking for an absolute unknown, it could be come up back as an unknown, or what have you. So it's with these scientific endeavors, it's definitely a work in progress. But there is room for error.
For sure. So like I know with the Olympic project, one of your guys' goals is you're really trying to push the Sasquatch phenomena, its mainstream, its acceptance to make it more accepted by mainstream science. You guys, correct me if I'm wrong, you guys have a good amount of like actual scientists, scientific researchers contributing to your guys' operations. I was kind of curious about what I was curious about two things, and you could answer in whichever order you like. I was just curious about I know on some podcasts you've mentioned quote closet believers in the scientific community. I was just curious if you could elaborate on that a little more, and just how what types of contributions you're actually getting from what are the most useful types of contributions you guys have been getting from the scientific community that's really been advancing your guys' research forward?
Yeah. Great question. So, I obviously, I shouldn't say obviously, I'm a part of a project called Project Zoo Book. Amy Boo is she basically is the one that put this whole Project Zoo Book thing together. She's the creator and controller of it. And what she's managed to do is bring a lot of academic individuals into a private setting when we do a lot of Zoom meetings, into a private setting where they can stay anonymous. Because a lot of these individuals don't want to become, they got careers. They got, they're not ready to be a John Bindernagel or a Dr. Meldrum or a John Mainzinski. Or Grover Krantz, these sorts. They're very interested in the topic matter. Most of them have never had an experience or encounter, but they're open-minded. And basically, what Project Zoo Book does, and it spills into the Olympic projects. We do have academic individuals within the Olympic project, but Project Zoo Book is just an area where we can. It's like a giant think tank, and we as laymen, I hate the word. I know a lot of people hate the word citizen scientists, but I'll just say laymen. And researchers, we can come and share ideas, ask questions, and these academic individuals from all walks of science will share their thoughts and opinions. A lot of them from different biologies, whether it's primate or ocean biology. They can share their thoughts, their opinions, and it's just like a giant think tank. What are the similarities? Are there any similarities? What are we looking for specifically as field investigators? What should we be looking for? How do we go about it? And so it's contributed that Project Zubik, for example, has contributed hugely. And I value these academic individuals that are willing to, like I say, they're in I call them in the Sasquatch closet, but they're very open and animated about learning or in listening, and then giving their 2 cents and from their scientific, backgrounds. And so I've gotten so much information that I utilize in the field as well as the Olympic project that, I can take. And a lot of it's constructive criticism. And that's awesome, because I don't have an ego. And none of the Olympic project members have an ego. We're not perfect. We make mistakes. We're not the best, the end all be all. No, far from it. We're just doing our darnest to do the best we can. And so when we get academic individuals willing to listen to us and look at what we're putting forth, man, it's a true blessing, and it's an honor to talk to these guys. And it's what John Bindernagel, it's kind of our motto. John Bindernagel, who was a friend of mine, he wanted to make this subject matter less taboo. And so we run with that. We're just trying to make this subject matter, whether it's Project Zubik or the Olympic project, less taboo, making an open discussion, an honest one with no bias, and let the cards fall where they may. But it really, I'm excited because I see a younger generation of academic individuals stepping forward with an open ear, an open mind, and fresh ideas that in all my years of doing this, I've never seen in this number. So it's every time I step in the field, there's something I'm taking from our discussions with these individuals, and I'm trying different ideas, different techniques. And so, I'm like, once again, very excited about the future of this sort of investigation or research.
Go ahead, Charlie. You're on mute, bud. Charlie's on mute.
I'm not good at mine.
Yeah. I'm on a good lip reader.
Sorry about that. Hey, real quick, speaking of Amy Boo and the project.
Yeah, we love Amy.
She wanted me to say hi to you. So
she's
Amy
awesome.
Says hi.
Yeah. She really created something unique with Project Zubik, and it's an honor to be a part of it and be kind of like one of the, I guess, the core members. Absolute privilege, and it's one of the coolest things I've been involved in a long time, and it's going places, I believe, bringing in new, fresh ideas and new scientists, and see what the future holds.
That's sure. Can we get a question? A question from Jamie King. He wanted to know how many footprints you find up there with all the wet ground. Just going back to all the wet ground, you find a lot of footprints up there, or you?
Honestly, no. We do find impressions periodically. It's very hard to find a really good one. I mean, we do find it's just hard in general. It's hard in some of these areas to find bear, and there's loads of bear. It's hard to find, in some cases, deer or elk or cougar or all your other ungulates and mammals. But we do find them occasionally, and a lot of times they're ambiguous. You can't say that it's really compelling, or that you can't even attribute it to, definitely not Sasquatch, but we do find them occasionally, and we have found some very, very interesting and very compelling impressions. The soil content up here, it is wet, but you'll be surprised how not very conducive some of these areas are for track impressions. And a lot of times you'll find something that's of interest, but then it leads right into the woods. It's either crossing a trail, a logging road, an embankment, and it's one and done, and it's into the woods. And that's what we find a lot. And a lot of the areas we traverse, which is off trail, you're not going to find any impressions. It is like a needle in a haystack. But we do find them occasionally, but not that often. No.
Real quick, another quick question: the area that you're researching, is it really accessible? Or is it just one way to get in? Because do you worry about like hoaxers and people finding out where the area is, and is it accessible for people to maybe play tricks on you and hoax?
One of the areas, because we're talking about 3 different areas. I'm not talking about the nest area, but 3 different. There's one area that It's fairly accessible by human. It could be. You get hunters in one of those areas. The nest site area, no, it's 2.5 miles behind a lock gate where we have private access to this area, and it's way off trail. There is no trails to find this area. I never say impossible. I think that's we a timber surveyor came across these nests, so he found them. So there was a human out there, and then he led us out there. With a lot of these impressions, that's why I like getting off trail. I like going into the thickest, nastiest stuff, so you can pretty much rule out human contamination, human being in that area trying to hoax. Because I don't get online and go, hey, I'm going to be out in this area tomorrow, or it's very spur of the moment, and a lot of times when we're out there, it's nasty weather. So when we come across something significant, I can almost 100% say that no human's been in that area for a long time, and no one's going to be trying to hoax somebody in the middle of the thickest, nastiest stuff, because nobody knows some of these areas where we're going and where they're at. There is one area that I would say that, yeah, it's possible. Absolutely. Humans do this, humans do weird things, and humans go to weird areas. But hoaxing us, at least in 2 of those areas, I would say no, absolutely not.
Good. I mean,
I was curious, by the way, just to get back on the topic of contributions from the scientific community. What type of contributions have you guys at the Olympic Project gotten from people like the field of psychology and whatnot?
Psychology,
if any at all. That's
no, it's
yeah.
Never been asked that question. Yeah, it's a great question. Never been asked before. Psychology, I can't say that we have. I've talked to individuals, online. I can't say I've gotten much feedback. I mean, basically, there's this group out of the UK. They interviewed not just myself, but a bunch of different, not just scientists involved with the Sasquatch phenomena, and they're into psychology, and they're actually writing a paper, and they interviewed a bunch of different investigators, enthusiasts, researchers, and they're doing a peer-reviewed paper on academia and also the citizen scientists or those involved in this study. And I didn't get much feedback, but it was really interesting talking to these 2 individuals because they're out of 2 major universities in the UK, out of England. Very smart. They've written peer-reviewed papers before, and I'm interested to see their exact angle. I think I kind of know it. I think they're actually, for me personally, I think they're in it for the right reasons. They're trying to understand why there's something going on here. Whether it's a mass hysteria or people are actually seeing something, but something's going on here. Why won't science look at this? There's something going on. So why won't science look at this? And I think that's the angle they're taking. I hope that's the angle they're taking. They're not believers. They're nothing to do with that. And so that was really unique. That happened. The interviews, I think, all took place last year. And we should be hopefully seeing something from this work they're doing, I would imagine, the next couple months to a year. But it'd be interesting to see, I would assume they have interviewed academia, individuals outside of the Bigfoot world that are poo-pooing it. And their angle, I think, is basically to see why isn't science sitting down looking at this from all aspects. Is it something physical? Is it something real? Is it, like I said, mass hysteria, people just misidentifications, all that stuff. Mm-hmm. But why shouldn't this be a scientific endeavor to really get to the bottom of it? And so that I really, other than that, not had any other feedback from any psychologists. No.
Yeah, for sure. Because a couple of things in that regard, I was always curious about, just to see what like a psychologist or someone who's in that field, their point of view is. Instances I'm huge in the flesh and blood camp, and I really think like a lot of people who claim that these things might have supernatural qualities or anything like that, like how people say they just like disappear when you look at them. I really can't explain it as well as someone in the psychological field would, but when you see something like that, it's pretty much like a very traumatic experience, and your mind blacks out certain details. So you come up with explanations like that, I guess, to tie those loose ends. I've always been curious just to see what like someone what someone in that field would have to say about occurrences like that. But I definitely agree with you though when you ask why mainstream science isn't looking at it as closely, especially for something, like I'll bring it up again, psychology, for instance. Even if they're not necessarily trying to uncover the truth behind this phenomenon, maybe they could use certain aspects of that research to simultaneously, advance what we're doing and advance maybe something else that they're studying. If that makes any sense.
Yeah, I wouldn't care if they came into it with their preconceived notions. I mean, as a scientist, you shouldn't, but if they just looked at the subject, matter as a whole, in its entirety, and actually got funded to do that, spend time in the field, spend time talking to these individuals. I am definitely of the flesh and blood camp. Absolutely. Never experienced, and I'm not discounting what other people experience. I personally never experienced anything, what they call woo in the woods. Everything that at first was odd to me or strange, or maybe even what I thought was like, well, that was kind of, is that what they're talking about? It's kind of paranormal like. I've always managed to, after thorough research, managed to explain it. And so I'm always, because I bet everything, and I try not to leave any open questions. If there's something in the woods I see, I'm going to figure out what it is. I'm going to do my dangest to figure out what it is. And that goes for most of the Olympic Project and many other individuals out there. But it would be interesting as a psychologist. If I was a psychologist, I'd be like, man, I want to pick these guys' brains and see what makes them tick and see if there's anything to this, whether it's a social thing or whatever have you, or is there something to it? Who knows?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
That's actually a pretty good segue into another topic Chuck and I wanted to bring up. So I listened to a couple of podcasts that you've been on, and I remember one thing you described members of the Olympic Project. A lot of you guys are, quote, knowers, meaning that you have seen this creature like in the flesh, for a fact that it's real. There's zero doubt it wasn't anything else you've seen. I guess the first thing, maybe just for our viewers, if you wouldn't mind, I know Charlie wanted to bring this up too. Maybe recount us with your encounter when you guys were, I think, camping in the Mount Hood area.
Yeah,
if serves me correct. And then, and then just as a follow up to that, if you don't mind, the second thing I wanted to ask was, where is it? Bear with me 1 second.
Why don't you tell the story, then you can follow up after.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, perfect.
Well, yeah, I mean, so I hate the word believer. I actually don't like the word knower. I do use it. I just know they exist. I just know they're out there. So it's, I don't want if you call me a knower. I'm not a believer. These things do exist. There's no doubt in my mind. And many of the Olympic Project members, I should say many, quite a few of the Olympic Project members have had a sighting or some experiences they can't explain. Doesn't make some of them believers or knowers. It just makes them curious. As we do have skeptical individuals that have never had anything of significance happen to them, but they have a curiosity and they know these individuals involved in this group and trust our opinions, our judgment, and our experiences. But we do have quite a few members that have had actual sightings, including myself. In August of 2011, and I'll kind of keep this short because it's a lengthy story, but a couple of buddies and I, co-workers, I'd moved up to Oregon in 2008, was doing, what I called research at the time, and didn't really find anything. Talked to a lot of interesting people, but never really had anything happen. One of the things I love to do is fish. So a couple of buddies and I in 2011, August, went out to Mount Hood. We had picked this area out because there was a bunch of high mountain lakes. And we hiked out to this one specific lake out there in Mount Hood as our base camp. And our goal was to make our base camp and hike out to some of these other lakes. There's about 8 in this area, spread out by miles apart, kind of remote area, very wild. And we weren't super familiar with this area. And we ended up getting lost, leaving our base camp the day we set up our base camp. That morning, we got lost, got up on this ridge line, and we're, just lost. We end up hiking that day before we eventually found the trail and made it back to our camp. We ended up hiking close to 17 miles. And that's the only time I've ever been lost before. But we took a wrong path, and then we got off trail. We're seeing bear sign. A buddy of mine he brought a pot and pan out there and was banging pots and pans. Told him to knock it off. because it's a very annoying. We were all armed. You know, I was armed with a weapon. I always go to the woods with the weapon, not for Sasquatch, actually for mainly for animals and people, because I bumped in my years a lot of weirdos and different animals, and just better looking at it than for it. You know, I do carry a foghorn sometimes, and I do carry bear spray. But you know, I feel more comfortable with a weapon. So anyways, got lost, hiked 17 miles. We finally make it back to our camp, and we're exhausted. We're out of water. We finished setting up our camp. We built a fire, cook a meal. We're talking about our plans the next day, because now we know where the trails are at. We're not going to get lost. We're going to hit some of these other lakes, and we go to bed after discussing our following day's plans. We were going to be out there for 3 to 4 days, and we're working on day 2. So we go to bed about 11:30, and about 1:30, 2 o'clock in the morning, I hear what sounds like, two rocks being smacked together from a distance, and it's getting closer and closer. My buddy, I had a buddy Ian with me, my buddy Mitch. We were kind of in a, next to a lake, in kind of a triangle formation. I was at the point. I was kind of at the top of the triangle, and these two were at the bottom ends. Ian was closer to the little hill, and my buddy Mitch was closer to the lake. And I'm hearing this, and my buddy Mitch is awake, and he goes, "Shane, are you awake?" I said, "Yeah." And we're whispering. We're a couple of feet apart. And he's like, "Well, what do you think that is?" I said, "I don't know. It sounds like two rocks, being smacked together." So in my head, it's dark. I'm trying to figure out what's going on. I hear the fire crackling because my buddy Ian, he's from Boston. He's afraid of bears. He's afraid of the woods. And so he built this huge fire up, collected all this wood. And he's out sleeping. Mitch and I are discussing what this could be. And I'm thinking, well, could it be antlers? Could it be a raccoon? But it's getting closer and closer, and then it stops. And then I hear, and Mitch and I were talking about this, we hear something moving around our camp, back and forth, stomping sticks, breaking stuff. At the time, I couldn't tell if it was just all footfall landing or if it was knocking branches off trees. It was just very quiet out there this time of year. You could hear, you could hear a pin drop practically. And so this thing sounded big, and it was circling our camp. And might have heard a possible percussive during all that. I can't say for sure. And so that was going on for a minute or so, and then that rock clanking sound started up again, and it got further and further away, and it was gone. I mean, I think we just laid there, talked about it a little bit, and we fell asleep. We wake up the next morning. We kind of discussed that, what transpired that night. Ian, our buddy Ian, thought we were messing with him because he's afraid of bears. We said, no, we really heard something was weird, but let's go fish. So we gather our gear up. We hike out. We hit 2 different lakes that day, catch fish. Spent the whole day out there, come back to our camp. Same MO as the previous night. We build a big fire, collect a bunch of wood, make a meal, talk about our plans for the next day, what other lakes we're going to hit. And we go to bed about 11:30 again. And then once again, we're all in bed sleeping. That 1:30, 2 o'clock hour, here's that sound again. And it's, coming from a distance, getting closer and closer. It just sounds like 2, smooth rocks just being smacked together. And it's getting closer and closer. Once again, Ian's asleep. My buddy Mitch and I are awake, and he goes, "Hey, Shane, you awake?" I'm like, "Yeah, it's back." I'm like, "Yeah, I hear it." It's getting closer and closer, and it stops. But I mean, it was very repetitious. It was weird. Not like occasional. It was like somebody holding 2 rocks, just doing that, but walking up from a distance close to our camp, and then it stopped. And once again, like the night previous, we hear stomping around, but it's much louder this time around. And it's moving around our camp up from a kind of a low area up on this hill behind my buddy Ian's tent, and he's still sleeping. And my buddy Mitch is hearing something to his left, and I'm hearing something to my right. And we're talking about this. And so in my head, I'm thinking, well, could there be 2 of whatever the heck this is? Because I'm hearing something here, and he's hearing something. Well, that went on, and then it stopped. And there was silence. And then all of a sudden, dead silence, you hear these tremendous power knocks, percussives on this tree. And it's right up above the hill where my buddy's tent is. It's probably maybe, I don't know, 30, 40, feet, maybe further away. I did eventually look for indentations on the tree. I never found one, but it was powerful. So powerful, 5 in a row, bam, 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 that in your tent, you could feel the vibration of whatever was hitting this tree. And it echoed in this canyon, this bowl we were in by this lake. It echoed. I mean, crazy powerful percussives. And you could feel them in your tent. Well, now everybody's awake. I mean, Mitch and I were already awake. Ian's awake going, what the heck is this? And I said, shut up, shut up. And he's freaking out. And then there's silence again. And out through the trees, maybe 30 seconds later, I hear something coming through the trees. And all the trees out there are old, they're all Douglas fir, a lot of old growth, large trees around this camp spot. And I hear something coming through the trees. And it's hitting branches coming down. And then, boom, it thuds right next to my buddy Mitch's tent. And my buddy Mitch was right next to the lake. And in front of his tent, there was kind of a muddy patch with some skunk cabbage and some other stuff. Well, you could hear whatever it hit the ground. It made this thud. Boom. And I knew that something had thrown, most likely, a rock. My buddy Mitch goes, Shane, do you know what that was? I said, I'm pretty sure that was a rock. So things just escalated quickly. My buddy Ian's freaking out. Now, while we were lost the previous day, I told him to quit, knock it off with the pot and pan junk. That's, we don't do that. And I gave him a pistol, which was bad. I wish I'd never done that. So he's freaking out in his tent. I'm thinking he's going to shoot somebody. And meanwhile, we got all this activity going on outside. And I thought, man, I got to get this gun off of him. I got to calm him down. He's not a woodsman. That was stupid of you to give this guy a pistol. And so I'm like, I got to get out of my tent and calm him down before he starts blasting, because he's just freaking out. So I unzipped my tent, and I didn't want to get out of my tent. I really did not want to get out of my tent. I was hoping I wouldn't see anything. And as I'm unzipping my tent, I'm looking around. After kind of peering around, I noticed movement almost directly in front of me behind a large Douglas fir, old growth tree. And I see movement. It catches my eye. And I just sit there with my tent half zipped. And I'm looking. And I see this thing. I see a hand, an arm, a shoulder. And from behind the tree, I see a head pop out every so often. This thing is swaying back and forth. Its hand and arm aren't really moving. I just see his head do that. And it's in, behind the tree, out the tree, behind the tree. And I'm seeing the arm and all that. And it looks massive. And I couldn't tell if it was looking at me, but I assumed it was. And I thought, well, crap, you unzip your tent. My heart is in my head. It's pounding. And I'm watching this thing. And it just takes its arm. It drops its arm off the tree, drops it to its side. It turns around and it walks up this trail. And it just takes off. And that's it. And I'm sitting there. I never got out of my tent. I'm sitting there. I hear Mitch breathing heavy. I'm breathing heavy, trying to hold my breath. And Ian's sitting there, and he's calmed down a little bit because nothing's been happening. And I just sat there in my tent. I zipped up my tent. I just laid back for a while. And collectively, I think we all just laid there until daylight, where once again, we were going to be out there for 3 to 4 days. But that next morning, I don't think anybody really said a word. We just packed up our stuff and hiked out of there and got out of there. And so that was the gist of my experience. It was a 2-night experience, with the second night actually seeing, this thing. I did, there's a lot of questions there. I did go back much later to get a height comparison, because there was a branch on this Douglas fir that was hanging down, and I remember it swaying back and forth, and the branch was just maybe, I couldn't tell if it was hitting its head or just off of its head. And it was between, 7.5 foot, but massive. And so that was the gist of my encounter that basically solidified for me the existence of Sasquatch. I spent months going out to the area and never had anything else happen until years later. Never had another sighting, maybe possible on a FLIR, on a thermal unit, but never another sighting like that. I've had some interesting experiences over the years, but that solidified for me. And it got me on a path where, for the few months I was out there, after I got the cojones to get back out there, it was a traumatic experience. You wish for this stuff, but when it actually happens, you kind of question, like, whoa, what are you doing? And that wasn't even a Bigfoot event. This was just me out fishing, doing what everybody else does to have these supposed encounters. But for months, I thought, I know where they're at. I can prove this. I just need to spend the time out there. I need cameras. I need this and that. And then nothing happened. And eventually came to the conclusion I need to reach out to other individuals that have been doing this longer than I have in these areas. And that's how I eventually met Cliff Berrickman and Derek Randalls.
Jeez.
Shane, real quick now, you said you were packing and you were worried about your friend using the gun. Did you any time think of like grabbing your gun and using it, or were you just going to let it play out? I mean, you didn't feel that threatened? Or
yeah, you know what? I've never been asked that question before. I usually when I'm in my tent and I'm, in certain areas where I do carry a weapon, I keep it close to my body, and I did think about one time picking it up, when my buddy Eden was freaking out. I didn't go for my weapon. I just wanted to grab his. I was just going to hop over and go into his tent real quick, grab his weapon, calm him down. It never really occurred to me. I mean, I said there was one time where I thought about grabbing my gun, it'd be the same if I had a bear in camp. I try and shoo it off, but I might go for my weapon, as a last resort. And I've had that happen before. No, I basically was playing off whatever this thing was trying to do. It came back a second night, and I was trying to figure out, man, this thing, it's escalated. So, but it never, at any given time, I thought it could come into camp, whatever this thing was, smash it, throw rocks on our tents. It's hitting a tree, it's throwing a rock. What else is it capable of doing? What else will it do? But I never thought about, I was just hoping the dang thing would go away, honestly, so yeah, I never really considered, the weapon was right there. I think if it hit the fan, I probably would have grabbed it.
Now, the weapon you had, if this is a big animal, would it have done anything to it, or would it made it angrier? Or I mean, it was a 357. That's what I was carrying. My other buddy was carrying a 45, and then the little pistol I gave my other buddy that I shouldn't have given one was just a 9mm. That wouldn't have done dilly squat. I'm not sure the 357 would have done anything, and I'm not sure the 45 would have done anything. Right. No, I mean, was it that big? Was it that big of a creature, though? Was it that big of a?
Yeah, animal? But you can, a black bear even, average black bear is between 250, 300 pounds. If you're not accurate, the pure adrenaline, even if you do a kill shot, the pure adrenaline of that animal will drive it and probably tear you up before it ever drops dead. And so, I've been bluff charged by black bear, never pulled the trigger. But yeah, you have to be very accurate because, certain calibers, I wasn't carrying a shotgun with slugs. I got friends that do that sometimes, and I can. But you have to be not just accurate, but you have to also 100% know what you're shooting at. Yep. And I guess there was times when I thought my life could be in jeopardy based on what the unknown. But I've been in a lot of harrowing experiences with known animals and people that I've never pulled the trigger or even pointed the gun at them. I guess I wait till that final moment when I have no other choice. So
yeah. Okay.
Well, listen, at least you guys are able to carry in the woods out there. Me and Charlie live in New York, New Jersey.
Oh yeah, I live in Canada.
Yeah, exactly. You're not allowed to carry it here. You're not allowed to defend yourself in these states. So
I got my mag flashlight. That's basically it. I can throw it at it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I couldn't. I had friends in Vancouver Island, and they carried bear bangers and other things, and I thought, man, in some of these areas, you got like freaking grizzly. Braver than I guess. Grizzly is a whole nother. My brother lives in Idaho, and he runs into grizzly occasionally, and but they're allowed to carry out there. I couldn't imagine just carrying around a bear banger, which they do work. They do work.
And you hear so many I hear so many stories too about hunters in Alaska or fishermen in Alaska, how they get charged by like a grizzly bear or something like that. They literally have to empty out their entire magazine, and sometimes it doesn't even stop them. It kind of goes back to the whole adrenaline thing that you were talking about. One thing I was curious about, though, just based on your experience, that these things are out there. You've seen one for yourself. How does having that experience affect your how do I word this? How does it change your outlook just on reality in terms of what could or couldn't be real? And just to follow up on that, how does it affect your standards when evaluating possible evidence or eyewitness accounts, especially with eyewitness accounts, just from a relatability standpoint?
Yeah, I mean, these things exist. Yeah, there's no doubt in my mind. I'm sorry. Can you repeat the first part of your question?
Oh yeah, I just wanted to know like how an experience like that like warps your outlook on reality, like in terms of just considering what could or couldn't possibly
Yeah.
be real.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, there's a lot of unknowns out there. I mean, just look at our oceans. I mean,
Oh, sure.
I'm actually, I don't do anything with the ocean stuff, but I'm always interested in what people are finding or seeing on the oceans because it's so vast. And when Sasquatch, its existence was solidified for me, it blew my mind because even up until that point, I thought, I was hoping they were real, but all the years I've been doing, I never really came across anything of interest. I talked to a lot of interesting people, maybe found an impression that was kind of interest, but when it was solidified for me, I thought, it's like that commercial with Santa Claus and the M&M. They do exist, and they see each other, and no, they do exist. So, but it opens up doors to, well, what else is out there, that's left to be discovered. I mean, once again, Sasquatch has never been proven, so it's not been discovered. It's just real for me. But it just opens up the door that, what else could be out there? I don't delve in anything else. I don't have time for it. Mm-hmm. Sasquatch is my main focus, my main endeavor, my main passion. But there's obviously other things out there around the world yet to be discovered, both small and big, that are very unique. And I let a lot of other people deal with the other stuff, and I live to them vicariously. And so, but with Sasquatch, they're real. And it just, there's different people when they have these experiences or this encounter that solidifies, something for them. They either get really afraid of it and they stay out. I've talked to hunters, and I'm sure you guys have as well, where, they've been doing it for, hunting 50 years, never seen anything. And all of a sudden one day they see it and they don't want to go back out to the woods. They can't believe that all those years they've been out there hunting, hiking, that they never came across a Sasquatch or never found an impression, but then bam, one day there it is. And it, and it happens with a lot of, people that get into this field or don't. They have it. They don't want to talk about it. They have the sighting. They don't want to talk about it. They have it and they tell people and they jump on podcasts, or they have the sighting and they want to do something about it. And that's where I fell into it even more so. I mean, I was, so-called investigator researcher up until that point. But here I am out in the woods, 2011, not banging on trees or yelling, and I never really did any of that stuff, but, not really looking for any physical evidence, not even, thinking about Sasquatch. And then I had this encounter, and it really opened my mind that, well, who has, most researchers and investigators never have a sighting or encounter. If they do, if they have multiple, then I start to question it. But it's always your average hiker, people doing average things, your hikers, your fishermen, your hunters, your person driving a car that have these encounters and sightings. It's not your investigator or researcher per se.
So I do remember, I heard you on Cliff and Vogel's podcast. That was an awesome episode, by the way. I remember you guys touched on what you described as, quote, long-term witnesses. I think Cliff might have mentioned it or during guys' conversation. So, habituation areas, possible habituation areas. I guess that's one thing, but when you encounter people who claim that they've seen these things more than once in multiple locations, how do you approach that? Just in terms of vetting them, just what could be true that they're saying, what could be full of shit.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, right nowadays, most of us don't really deal with a whole lot of witnesses. I mean, occasionally, we're kind of focusing on what we're doing, and if there's a sighting near the area we're in, yeah, we're all over it. We're interested in that. But with a lot, I do find it very hard to believe in a lot of cases that people are having multiple sightings and multiple encounters. Now, having said that, it's not impossible in my opinion. And in some cases it does happen. I'm not a big fan of the word habituation. I'm not a big fan of that word. I don't think anybody's, habituating a Sasquatch per se, because I don't think Sasquatch hangs out in one area year round. They may traverse through the area year round, but they're not going to hunker out in that area because then they're going to basically give themselves up because they're going to make an indentation in that area that's going to be discovered. But there are certain individuals in some of these remote areas that I really pay attention to. Usually it's a solo individual in a semi-remote cabin or house. In a lot of cases, it's a house that's been vacant for a lot of years and they move in there and they start having this activity and it doesn't go away. And I worked with 2 different individuals that have had very interesting and very, one of them specifically for over a year had very compelling stuff happen. This individual also had a sighting, and one of the workers that was working on her house who didn't know anything about any possible Sasquatch in this area saw one down the road from her house and it flipped them out. And she was having a lot of vocals that David Ellis was recording on her property, placing audio units, and there was impressions found. She lived in a glass house that from the woods, you could look right in there. She didn't have any curtains, and she was by herself most of the time because her husband worked out of town. But this house had been vacant for like 3 or 4 years. And now all of a sudden you have somebody move in there that's turning on lights and stuff. So maybe it's just an attractant. I wouldn't call it habituation, but just whatever was in this area, I think, was just very curious as to, here's my big screen TV now. I got somebody moving around in the house with lights on, and they got goats and horses and chickens. And this wasn't here for 3 or 4 years. And this is an area I used to traverse through. So she wasn't habituating, but she was having this odd activity and possible Sasquatch activity. And so I think in certain areas, there are individuals that maybe do have multiple sightings or experiences, but if it goes on, you just got to take everything with a grain of salt. Once again, Sasquatch has not been proven to exist, but there are a few details you look for in some of these witnesses, at least from my perspective, and you can maybe get a better picture. And if they're not super outrageous, which a lot of these individuals, they're not been in the Sasquatch. They're just curious as to, well, what am I experiencing? What did I see? And they seem, some of them seem very truthful, and then others, you can tell are just full of it.
So we're in almost an hour now. Just to shift gears real quickly. Shane, I know you've been on a good amount of podcasts. I think this might have been, at least from the ones I listened to, I think this might have been the longest you've gone without touching on the whole Bigfoot nest phenomena. So I guess we could pat ourselves on the back for that. But
thank you.
How you holding up, Jane? How you feeling? You all right? You ready to go for another round?
Yeah. That was a light round, I guess. So am I in for it now?
Oh yeah, all good. But one thing I was curious about though, through your explanations and descriptions of the Bigfoot nests, one of the recurring traits I saw you mentioned whenever you bring that up are huckleberries. Seems to be like a recurring characteristic in the composition of these nests. So what I'm curious about is, was it just like one particular instance with like the huckleberries being part of like the nest composition? Is it like a recurring trait? Would you be able to elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah. Just to say one thing, just because I'll get attacked for this, you said Bigfoot nests. No one in the Limit Project is absolutely 100% saying these are Bigfoot nests. Okay, because we get blamed for that all the time. I will say that these are unknown. Whatever's making these, it's not normal behavior. And I have my reasons to think that it's possibly related. A lot of reasons, but no, all these nests, all 24 found to date, 24. Oh, wow. Found to date are made out of nothing but huckleberry, evergreen huckleberry. And with the larger boughs on the bottom, larger branches, and the smaller stuff up top, they range in size from 3 feet across. Yeah, that's one, just to clarify, that's one that picture there, that's one I reconstructed for a symposium. I wanted people to see their sandbags in the middle there to show I had to put the weight down there to show how much they were flattened. But made out of huckleberry with the larger stuff on the bottom, bigger stuff on top. They range in size from 3 feet across to over 8.5 feet across. Most of them are bathtub shaped. They're not perfectly circular. And that's me laying in it. But and we're not taking samples from that one, just to clarify. Human contamination all around.
Was it comfy?
Very comfy. It makes a lot of sense why you would build something like that in the woods. It's very comfy. Keeps you off the wet ground. and you got this kind of warmth around you, the huckleberry is very comfy if you construct it, right. And that's what I noticed, having not just built one of these nests, but also deconstructed one, noticing that it was made with intelligence. I mean, the bigger boughs on the bottom, the smaller stuff on top, with nice cushioning in the middle, with huckleberry boughs in some cases pushed into the ground and almost like a frame. And then I wouldn't say weave, but the huckleberry boughs formulated around him. So something with intelligence, with definitely an opposable thumb, in my opinion, and many others' opinion, because there's no teeth marks, no claw marks. Some of the breaks are 9 feet off the ground. Some of the breaks are, a foot off the ground. Some of the material was brought from over 25 feet away to finish constructing a nest. So it wasn't just like grab here. You actually had to leave this area, walk, grab more material, and come back to this nest. And there are all these nests are on fingers coming off a ridge line or a plateau, and they're in formations. You got maybe 7 nests in one area that are mere feet apart, very military-like, and very well constructed, of different sizes.
So just to clarify, just have 2 follow-up questions. When these nests are discovered, are they just kind of like out in the open, or do you really have to like do some digging to notice them? Like, do they like blend in with the surrounding environment?
So this is how I compare it. So say you're looking at a house, you're a regular house, you're walking up to a house. Well, you can't see inside that house. You can see that there's walls there. Until you open the door, you can't describe what's inside that house. So when you're walking up to this area, there's just a wall of huckleberry. And there's the Douglas fir in this area. It's a thick tree canopy, so you can't look down and you can't see into it. You have to physically walk into this area to actually see the nests themselves. And they don't really blend in with anything. Once you're in there, they stand out like a sore thumb, because there's nest. And they're, when you pluck huckleberry and you turn it upside down or move it around, it's got a different sheen to it. So it's very noticeable. And when you walk in there, you see all these different nests, and you see the destruction. All the huckleberry boughs in this area have been broken off or twisted off. A lot of the huckleberry leaves have been plucked off and sometimes piled on the ground. So you won't see it from any other angle until you're in that little, 90 by 90 nest area. And when you're in there, the devastation is tremendous. I mean, that's, this nest was originally, the original nest site was discovered by a timber surveyor, not by the Olympic Project. We were led out there after that. And so, and then we subsequently found, to date, 24 nests. The original surveyor found 3, and then he got out of it because he got weirded out. He never seen anything like this before. And they were fresh huckleberry breaks, and the nests were fairly fresh. So,
Wow.
When you come across one, and it's my opinion, again, you're going to find these way off trail in remote areas. You're not going to find them next to a human trail, next to a game trail. You're going to find these in remote, hard to get areas. And I think that speaks, for itself as to why.
And for like, you could tell I'm a fairly young guy. I haven't been doing this nearly as long as you have, or a lot of the older research, everything like that. But one aspect of Bigfoot research, and Chuck could attest to this, I've always been like a very outspoken skeptic about stick structures. It's just something I've kind of just been very dismissive about, really ignored, paid no regard to, just because I really think it's just a form of wishful thinking for a lot of researchers. Like it's more just a product of like them wanting to see something that might not necessarily be the case. But I always like to look for like subtle details whenever I listen to accounts from, whether it's witnesses, researchers, people describing things, recounting stories, everything like that. And the fact that you clarified all 24 of these nests were made out of huckleberry, I really feel like that's like a detail that's really, really difficult to dismiss.
Yeah. I was gonna say I'm not a big fan of strict structures, period, because most of these, and maybe there's something to it, maybe there's not. most of the stick structures, and I found loads of them. They're almost either natural or man-made, because a lot of these stick structures are next to trails, man-made trails or game trails, and a lot, man, people don't give, Mother Nature and Earth and enough credit. The weather, wind, and just natural occurrences can create all sorts of weird-looking structures. There have been a few that I've seen over the years that are of interest, but I'm not a big fan of tree structures. I'm just not. And sorry if I hurt anybody's feelings, but I'm just not a big fan of them. They're not very compelling to me. They're mainly explainable. These nests, I've done a lot of hiking, exploring in California, Oregon, and Washington. These nests are all 24 of them, including 2 bush nests that are a mirror image of what's on the ground, but a couple of feet off the ground, built into the huckleberry, out of huckleberry. That's 2 out of that 24. They're all amazing. I mean, simply amazing. And when you have a timber surveyor who's been out in these areas doing this stuff for 27 years, come across this and go, wow, this is weird. I've never seen anything like this before, to the point where he backs out of there. And then subsequently later, not just the Olymp Project members, but other academic individuals coming out to this area and going, what the heck is making these things? They're all made out of huckleberry, and there's no evidence of teeth or claw marks, and some of the breaks are tremendous, over 2.5 inches in diameter. Something with strength broke this, and then constructed these nests spread out over hundreds of yards in groups. It's and like I said, absolutely 100% out of huckleberry. It's very, very odd.
So just real quickly, I know Chuck has a question from the viewers that he wants to get in by. So I just want to throw this in real quickly with what you said about hurting people's feelings with dismissing stick structures. I could just from firsthand experience, people get pissed that are real animal believers, and that if you don't tell them what they want to hear, they get super defensive. Some people have gotten outright nasty with me if I even just imply that I disagree, that there's nothing to them. It's almost like a fanatical facet that that people are so overzealous about.
Well, yeah, and I tell people I could be wrong. I'm not an expert tree structure person. I'm not an expert. I'm just saying from my experience and from my my eyes and all that. It's probably not anything significant. Like I said, I've seen a couple that are interesting. I think one in all the years I've been out in the woods that I thought was interesting, but it couldn't rule out human. And then people have sent me stuff over the years, but the vast majority of them are just, they look like nature. It doesn't make it, and it, to me, it doesn't make sense why Sasquatch would do that in a lot of circumstances. Now, great apes, monkeys, they will play with sticks and they will do weird stuff, with sticks. But some of these, one example, the teepee stuff. The teepee stuff kind of just drives me nuts, because humans are known for making teepees and weird, little bushcraft stuff. And then you get people that go into these areas and they go, "Oh, I've never, this has got to be, this can't be human based on the size of the limbs." But man, and then they don't go and look for hair or anything else. And so it's just, what do you want me to do with that? There's nothing I could do with it. I can't validate it. I'm sorry. It's probably human or nature.
And just to touch on too what you said about primates using sticks, just to circle back with the nests, I think especially with gorillas too, there's a lot of overlap that with gorillas and Bigfoot that I really think a lot of people don't realize. They both throw rocks and sticks. I think there's been documented instances of gorillas even doing wood knocks, banging sticks and stones against trees and other hard surfaces. Gorillas release pheromones. People always talk about how bad Bigfoot smell, and gorillas also build nests. So with that said, one of the things I meant to ask you was, what are some similarities between gorilla nests that you found with these nest-like structures?
Yeah, I mean, gorillas, chimps, and orangutans are the three great primates that I really spent a lot of time studying. In fact, in Project Zoo book, we got some experts in those fields, and so I can ask questions that may have correlation with possibly what we're dealing with. And so the gorilla nests are, Derek Randalls did this man, he spent weeks and weeks looking up ground nests. You know, Derek Randall's a Olymp Project Corps member, and he outdoorsman, hiker, hunter. He had never seen anything like these, and so he started doing a lot of research. And the closest thing he could find was gorilla nest. And I, having looked at pictures and in comparison, it is the closest thing that I can pin to, to these nests that we're working on in the Pacific Northwest. Obviously, we do not have, silverbacks running around up here in the Pacific Northwest, but they are so similar in shape, in construction, in not material, but very similar in those aspects. And in some cases, very similar to where they're built. If you look at like the Cross River gorilla, they build nests and spend their time on slopes that are very similar to where these nests are situated. So there's a lot of similarities there, and same thing with chimpanzees. There's a lot of similarities there. And there's orangs, only make their nests up in trees, but there's some similarities in their construction. So there's a lot of comparisons there with great apes and what we're dealing with, more so than, say, anything known to make nests here. A lot of people claim that these are bear nests. There's so many things to point in the completely opposite direction that it's not a black bear. Multiple things, and I can go off and off and off on that. But it's much similar to gorilla nests, or chimpanzee or orangutan nests. And so a lot of similarities there: construction, size, shape, and whatnot.
So we do have one question in the chat. We want to run by you. Squatch Talk asks, why are these nests only found on this one property / area? So have all 24 been found in the same area, or if you could just give us a little context?
Yeah, that's such a cool question. Yes, to date, but we're only really working this area, and it's a vast area. It's got lots of ravines, mountainous area. It's vast, and we don't think nests are being made. Well, we know nests are not being made. Every year. They're probably made every couple of years. They're not made every day or every night. They're made, I think, for a specific reason in this area for a specific reason, and every couple of years for a specific reason. But we are looking based on, these nests are on coming off up a ridgeline on a finger that's next to a seasonal salmon creek, a western facing slope with impenetrable huckleberry bushes. Basically, you can't sneak into this area from any angle. And this area does have a lot of history of Sasquatch sightings. Way before the Olymp Project came around, there's, they go back a long, long time. Historically speaking, there have been other nests found in California, in Vancouver Island, Alaska, Washington, Oregon, Montana, Florida. So there are other nests being found. Just go read Rainfall Sasquatch by Dr. Robert Alley. He has a nest in there that a timber surveyor once again found up in Alaska. And most of these nests are discovered, and there's been nests discovered, historically speaking. The vast majority of them are found by people involved in the timber company, in the timber agencies, surveyors and whatnot, because these are hard to get areas, areas that people won't be hunting, hiking, or fishing in, because they're remote, they're hard to get to, and they're nasty. You can't see a couple of feet in front of you. You could be bumping into a bear or, whatever, a cougar. Not areas that your average person would go into. And so people that have a job like a timber surveyor that's going out marking a timber cut, he has to be in this area. Those are the guys that seem to find these things the most. Now, other people that get off trail have found other nests. So they are being found, but not all the time. And the one significant thing that I guess kind of separates the nest study we're working on is the sheer number. We got 24. The newest one, from 2016 through, the beginning of 2017, we discovered 23 nests. And then we were looking and looking and looking all these different areas in this area and not finding a new nest anywhere for years. Mm-hmm. Then February of 2020, Todd Hale and I were in an adjacent ravine. The same sort of setup as I laid out before with the seasonal salmon creek, the western facing slope, and a finger ridge. We came across something actually making one of these nests February of 2020, the tail end of it, almost March. the time of year that we think these things are being made, which is, the end of February into March. That's when we hypothesize that these things are being made, every 3-4 years. And this is, 4 years later. And here we are. We came across something making one by sheer accident. We were going to go explore this ravine. And we just happened to, before it got dark, I wanted to show Todd Hill where this area was we're going to be researching, and walked in on something, crackling brush coming at us. And the following day, when we actually walked in there, we found this gigantic pile of huckleberry that had been freshly snapped that day that was starting to be formulated into a large nest. So they're not making them all the time. Why this area? I think it's because it's remote. It's hard to get to. It's got tons of natural resources, both water, ungulates in this area. The huckleberry will last. Huckleberry basically starts off end of July, August. It could last, because it's a very temperate area. It could last into this area through February, which is almost unheard of, because it's almost like a microclimate where it doesn't see a whole lot of snow, but it can. And it's, it's wet, but it's very temperate. And there's a lot of natural resources, including multitudes of berries and other things to eat.
So one thing you mentioned, that you find them every, like they keep showing up every couple of years. I think I remember you saying on one of one of the shows you've previously been on. Correct me if I'm wrong. This could draw another parallel between Bigfoot and primates. Don't either gorillas or orangutans, don't they reproduce or mate or whatever every 4 or 5 years or something like that?
Yeah, orangutans specifically, they reproduce between every 4 to 8 years, every 6 to 8 years. And that's one of my favorite comparisons, because a lot of Sasquatch sightings report this kind of like orang color. I just got a new one a couple of days ago of orang colored Sasquatch. And at nighttime when you're looking at something that's orang colored is going to look dark. So I think there's a lot of comparisons with orangutans, especially when it comes to the birthing, because one of the running ideas with the nests is that this is a possible birthing or nursery scenario. Possible. We haven't proved that these are Sasquatch nests, but possible theory is that these are birthing area, because the huckleberry, the evergreen huckleberry, is a birthing aid. Doctors used to give women, a concoction of huckleberry leaf and sugar after childbirth to help regain their strength. And we noticed in the nest area that there was piles of huckleberry leaves just piled up, plucked off, and in piles. Whether that was going to be used for more nesting material or eating, I don't know. But the birthing scenario, if these nests are being made and once again, we haven't been in this area long enough. We need to be there a long time to kind of maybe get a better picture. But if they're being made every 3, 4, 5 years, maybe that fits into that idea, just like with orangutans who give birth every 4 to 6 to 8 years. They're not popping out kids every year. And maybe that speaks to why there's not that many Sasquatch, if they're not giving birth every year like humans can do. They're way more selective and just not producing as much offspring to have large numbers. Maybe they thrive with that. Maybe that's their thing. But it's interesting you mentioned that, because I think there's something to that possibly.
Shane, real quick, with as far as the property, have you guys ever taken any aerial views of the nests, or with the GPS coordinates or anything like that, to kind of figure, maybe there's another area that you can concentrate on because there is no nests, or that have the same type of environment as the ones that do have the nests?
Absolutely, and that's one of the biggest things we've been doing in the last couple of years. Because there's other areas that we feel are very viable and very similar to the areas we're working in. Some of the issues that we have is that we don't have access or can't have access to those areas. And so that makes it very difficult. But there are 2 to 3 areas that are so similar that, quite honestly, we have plans to get into these areas, that if we don't come across we can argue what's making these nests, but we don't come across an old nest or a new nest in one of these areas, whether it's 2 or 3 years old, because after that they start dissipating. You're not going to even recognize them. I'd be shocked we didn't find them, because something's making these nests, and it can't be just this one area. It's got to be elsewhere. It's got to be elsewhere. And so I'd be shocked that we didn't find other newer nests or older nests, however old, in some of these other areas. And we're working on getting into some of these areas, permission to explore. And man, it would be very exciting if we could find and that's why I talk about this, because I'm hoping someone else out there will come across exactly what we're working with. Maybe not the same material. And I have talked to a few people over the years that have come across very similar things in other states. And I think that's, it will help paint a bigger picture. When are those nests being made? What time of year? When are they made out of? Where are they being found? Mm-hmm. So these other areas we're looking at, I'm this year, I hope to really, get boots on the ground in some of these areas and explore and see what we can come up with. But yes, we've done the aerial stuff. We know this area very well. These are areas, once again, from an aerial perspective, you can't really see through the tree canopy. So you're just looking for geography. That's mainly what you're looking for.
Okay, I'm sorry, I wasn't sure if you were done or not yet. One thing I was curious about, Shane, if these are alleged Sasquatch nests, besides like all of the circumstantial evidence we've discussed, what, if any, other evidence has been found to corroborate the claim that these might in fact be Sasquatch nests?
Yeah, so there's been quite a, the typical stuff. I shouldn't say typical, but what you would typically expect to find if you're claiming that these are anything to do with possibly with Sasquatch. We found multiple foot impressions, including this new nest we came across in 2000, or new nest in the making in 2020. Multiple 14-inch tracks, which is, it's another interesting comparison to the Patterson-Gimlin film. I'm not sure where you guys stand with that, but Patty was about 14 inches. And so the impressions we're finding around some of these nests are about 14 inches. Now, if Patty is, appears to be a female, obviously, and, there was a nest found in Scorpion Creek, 1967, that feeds into Bluff Creek. There was a nest found down there. A lot of people don't know that. Found by a timber cruiser. So you got Patty. She's a female. Was she using a nest to give birth, or did she give birth? Who knows? But she was 14-inch, in size in her foot impression. Well, that's what we're finding in a lot of these areas around these nests, is these 14-inch impressions. Some of them very good, some very more ambiguous. We've got hand impressions. We have hair. The hair is, to me, is pretty dang amazing. It lacks a medulla. It doesn't match black bear, elk, deer. It doesn't match anything in these areas. I'm not a scientist. I can look at this underneath a microscope and tell you it lacks a medulla, and I can compare it to known animals and say, well, it doesn't match this stuff. But, Dr. Meldrum will tell you that it's primate hair. He'll straight up tell you that. Cindy Dosen of Homini Enigma will tell you that it fits other unknown hairs from around, the Pacific Northwest and around the country. So you got the hair too, the foot impressions, the hand impressions. We originally, the original nest area, James Milne and the Lint Project went to what we called a point nest, because the original nest area had 7 nests, including a bush nest, and they were in a V formation. Well, at the point, I called a point nest, which leads down into the ravine towards the Salmon Creek, which was one of the larger nests. There was 2 rocks above the ground sitting next to this nest. I don't have the rocks with me, but they're about softball size, a little bit smaller. But when he picked these rocks up, the only rocks in this area that were above ground, sitting next to each other, next to this point nest, he picked them up and they had obvious score marks. Something or someone had some point in time. This wasn't nature. It wasn't like these are good, heavy little rocks. Something or someone had at one point in time smacked those rocks together and made obvious white score marks. What else? And then just the historical stuff. This area is known for its sightings. It's known for its vocals. We have a ton. Chris Spencer, and originally David Ellis, and he still does. David Ellis was helping me place. I was placing a lot of audio recorders in this area, and we got a lot of unique audio that doesn't match visually. A lot of it does. We get a lot of the known stuff, but then some of it doesn't match anything that we can compare it to as of yet. And Chris Spencer is now in the picture now, and he's been out in this area for years now. And we've been using long-term audio units that record upwards of 30 days. And we've been doing that year-round, like every month, every day of the week. And we get spells where we get nothing. And then we get, nothing ambiguous or I would say interesting, the known stuff. And then we get some stuff that defies logic in a lot of ways. It sounds more like chimpanzee-like. It sounds more gorilla-like. We get a lot of percussives. We do get a lot of vocalization. So we have the audio aspect to this too that is still ongoing. Chris Spencer is actually coming up this weekend, so we can service this long-term audio, collect the SD cards, and replace it with new batteries and everything else. So that's an ongoing thing that to me is amazing. The audio that we pull out of this area, not every month, not every week, but occasionally, it's very compelling. And then, we've had Derek Randalls was in this area a couple years back while they were out driving one of these roads. His wife and himself had seen a tall, upright looking auburn, colored figure shaking a tree. They didn't see it shaking the tree at first, but it was basically bouncing back and forth, and it was about 6 inches across. And they thought at first it was like a heavy piece of machinery. Well, when they drove down the road a little bit and they saw this upright figure leave the tree, and the tree stopped. They went down there, and this thing had to be at least 6.5, 7 feet tall above the brush. And when Derek went to shake the tree, and I've seen this tree, and I've tried to shake it, you can barely budge it. So there's been other sightings besides that in this area. Cliff Berkman got a hold of me because Cliff's been out to this area and he knows the area well. And he's been working with an individual that's been casting tracks in an adjacent area, but close by. And we've investigated other individuals that have had sightings just outside of this area, but within proximity, including 2 loggers that saw, a month apart, a family unit, what they would call a family unit of Sasquatch, 2 big ones and 2 small ones outside of logging gates that aren't too far away from this area. So there's just a lot, it's kind of like you got all these puzzle pieces, and then you start putting the puzzle together and it kind of paints a picture possibly.
So 2 questions here, one from SoCal Squatch and then one from yours truly. SoCal Squatch wants to know how large or how long is the property line, this area that you guys are doing research?
Yeah, I know who that is, and he knows I won't answer that. Yeah, how long is the property line? What a smarty pants.
Now the second one's for me, going back to you're talking about the hair and everything like that. What's a medulla?
So the medulla is like the centerpiece of the hair. So if you think of a pencil, that would be the lead. That'd be the lead of the pencil. So that's basically what it is. Most humans have a medulla. Sometimes they have a lacking medulla or a partial medulla. Most black bear have a medulla. Most animals do. Some don't. But this hair is very consistent in that it lacks medulla. And underneath a microscope, forgot to mention this earlier, a lot of it has red pigmentation or granules under it. So I thought that was really interesting. You go with that orangutan stuff again.
Right.
Yeah. But just to, because he brought up the property line, a lot of people will get angry that we don't share the location and do this and that. Well, unfortunately, it's not our property. And we've been very, very, this is a timber company allowing us on their property with gate keys. Oh, wow. Nobody, these things are like, to get gate keys, trust me, it's like gold. It's like winning the lottery. So we got to respect them. We can't have a bunch of people walking through this area. And plus, we're not out in these areas every day. We actually leave for lengthy periods of time. That's why we do the long-term audio to kind of, if something's making nests, if you make a big, appearance there all the time, you're camping, you're hiking this area, whatever's making them probably won't want to hang around. They'll just move off. So we're trying to not leave a big impression of ourselves out there, just trying to stay on the outskirts. We got certain months we do stuff in there, and then months we pull out.
Now, is the lumber company still working the property, or is it completely off limits to them, or because that's revenue for them? So I'm sure they'll be getting to a point where they're going to be like, okay, we need to make some money here.
Originally, so this is a very, very, very large timber company that owns properties in multiple states, and this area is relatively ready to harvest. It's not been timbered in over 50 years, which I think is another key aspect to this. But the one issue, they gave us 5 years originally, and they prolonged it. They gave us longer and gave us other areas we can traverse through because they're interested. Actually, one of the individuals, one of the owners, his brother had a sighting, not in this area, elk hunting down in South Washington. So this guy's interested. And he said, my brother's, he's 70 years old, and he wouldn't lie. And he's never even thought about Bigfoot till he saw this thing in the field while he was out glassing for elk. So he's very interested in it. And so this area right now, we have it for, until they tell us no. But one of the things about this area is that the amount of permits, because it's so close to some of these rivers and creeks, that get the permits, it's going to take a long time. They have to put them out there, and then so there's a lot, and it's going to be a hard area to timber because there's a lot of ravines and stuff. It's going to be a hard area. So I think that again speaks to why maybe these nests are being built in this area.
And I think there's a sort of irony to that. You're having a timber company give you guys access to this land, because a lot of people think, if a Bigfoot's ever proven to officially be real, because there'll obviously be a piss ton of protective efforts to try and conserve them. One of the biggest industries that would probably suffer as a result would be the timber industry. So,
that's so true, man. It's so true. I remember when Derek got a hold of me, he said, "You'll never guess what." And this timber guy, this timber surveyor got a hold of me, and Department DNR, Department of Natural Resources, and the head owner, and they gave us the keys. I was kind of like, I was kind of blown away, because they're allowing us to do what we do on their property. I mean, it kind of blew my mind. And to give us gate keys to further, I mean, they were interested. There was no conspiracy. It wasn't like, there's nothing to it, or they weren't hiding anything. They gave us full access to this area, and it's a big timber company. This is not a small scale like mom and pop shop. This is a big deal. So, I mean, I won't get into arguments about whether the federal government knows about Sasquatch or this, but this timber company, who, like you said, I mean, this is their livelihood. This is how they make money. If Sasquatch was ever proven on their property, I mean, that's going to change things. It's going to change things. Yeah, it's going to, of course. I mean, it's it's like the whole issue we had with the owl up here in the Pacific Northwest years ago with the timber.
I remember that.
Yeah. Well, this is going to be like on steroids.
Mm-hmm.
And not just, it's not even going to just affect this timber company. It's going to affect all these lands. But maybe they don't think we have a chance in hell, this timber company, and they don't care, but they'll give us, a little leeway to get out there and do our thing. But man, I tell you what, I'm blown away that they allowed us. Still to this day, I'm blown away, and we keep in contact with them. They're actually interested in kind of what we're doing. And so, yeah. And that don't get me wrong, that doesn't happen every day. And that's like, getting struck by lightning.
Well, one thing I will say, I'm sure you guys will agree with me, if these things are ever proven real, after I finish rejoicing and everything like that, I think the first thing I'm going to do is take every cent I have in my E-Trade account and just dump it all in hemp stock. Because that industry will probably explode after
You're right.
protective measures and everything like that.
Yeah.
So, for anyone who's financially savvy out there, if these things are real, that's probably gonna be the under the radar move. Hemp stock.
I think I'll just start buying up all the lumber I can right away. I'll just buy sheds and sheds of lumber, because you're not going to find it after that.
Nope.
You have to import it.
So we do have one interesting question here. David, I don't know if that's his first and last name or not, but I digress. He wants to know if you think Squatches have an alpha male who fills these nests with multiple females.
Yeah, I mean, I can't. Once again, all conjecture. I mean, obviously, I can't say, but when I kind of alluded earlier to these two different timber company employees that were parked outside of this particular gate. This is back in 2016. Not too long after the nest discovery, but they were parked outside this gate a month apart. One guy was, out there waiting to be let in this gate, and he saw what he described as a large male, a female, and like two smaller Sasquatches, juveniles, whatever. And then a month later, another truck driver saw the same thing, basically outside this gate. The guys don't know each other. My opinion is that, I mean, I don't know, that when you look at sightings, it's usually either a large male or something. It's rare. I mean, they do happen, but it is pretty rare that you see a female or juveniles. It does happen, but the vast majority of sightings, if you look at the numbers, is of large males or males. And to me, that makes sense, because the females and little ones are going to be probably way back out there, where the males, just look at, you could use known primates. They do the same thing. The males got a territory. They have to know what the people are doing, where they're at. They have to know what other maybe Sasquatch are doing. They have to know where to find food, when to move. They're the alpha, I guess. And that would make sense to me. Is it true? I don't know. But I would imagine that they either have a small occasionally, because I think they're very nomadic, but maybe a family unit where the female or multiple, family units in an area, and the male just kind of circumferences this area. And that's why you get these sightings, of these males and less of the females and the juveniles, because they're out, staying away from people, where the male has to be out there possibly watching its territory and, like I said, checking on humans. That's just my thought process. And if they are making nests, I think chances are you'll see the male before you ever see the female or juveniles.
One thing too, I just want to touch back on the whole thing with the huckleberries. Have you noticed, or like, have you incorporated into your research or noticed any overlap with just huckleberries being located in any other specific areas that coincide with the area having a lot of sightings? Like, if there's sightings in other areas outside of that spot where you're finding these nests, do there also happen to be huckleberries in the area as well, or?
Yeah. I mean, California's got its huckleberry. I think it's even got evergreen. I could be mistaken. The evergreen mainly grows up in the Pacific Northwest, all the way up into Canada. But there's I forget how many, 27 different varieties of huckleberry. I mean, the East Coast has got theirs. You got red huckleberry, blue huckleberry, evergreen huckleberry. But a lot of sightings are around huckleberry. If you read a lot of encounters where people are out gone, picking huckleberry, and they, there's chances you'll bump into a bear or deer and stuff. Bears specifically, they love huckleberry. But there's a lot of reports in some of these adjacent areas up and down the Pacific Northwest where people are out around huckleberry and they see a Sasquatch. They don't necessarily see a Sasquatch eating the huckleberry, but they're around the huckleberry. It's not just evergreen huckleberry, which we're dealing with mainly here, and there's a couple other varieties. But there's definitely a lot of sightings around huckleberry. And if I'm not going to get into this, but I'll tell you too, if you look at some of where people go missing, a lot of times it's around huckleberry patches. But, I'm not saying Sasquatch is doing that, but because bears. And then if deer and whatnot are eating the huckleberries, well, what eats deer? Well, cougar. So there's a lot of, and a lot of this huckleberry grows, at different elevations, and some of these areas are treacherous. So it could be why some of these people go missing. But I thought that's interesting that a lot of reported missing people go missing from huckleberry patches.
It's so eerie that you brought that up. I was literally thinking about bringing that up to you next time I had a chance, because I'm a SUNY millennial. I'm not really a big book reader, but I had read some parts of Dave Paulides' Missing 411, and that's one aspect that he really touches on. So it's really interesting that I think you brought that up. I'm sorry, Chuck, did I cut you off, or?
No, good.
All right. Yeah, I just wanted to bring that up. You could say what you were about to say. Sorry about that.
Yeah, it was basically it. Yeah, people, like I said, but people go missing from these areas, and chances are it probably has nothing to do with Sasquatch, but it is interesting that a lot of the Sasquatch reports and sightings are around huckleberry. But then again, kind of makes sense. It's a good food source.
Yeah, for sure. So
we got to look for some huckleberry up here, Mike. We got to look for some huckleberry up here in New Jersey and New York.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, in fact, if you guys, I highly recommend this individual. You guys have probably heard, if you're at least on social media, Squatcher Metrics. There's other map guys out there. I know a few of them. They're fantastic. With Squatcher Metrics, his name's Wes. He's actually out of London. He does come to the States periodically, but he fantastic resource. And he's actually the one that opened my eyes to the medicinal purposes of evergreen huckleberry. I never even thought to look into it, and then he brought it to my attention. And we've done a lot of research on the medicinal purposes of huckleberry and other plants in this area. But he's also gone back and looked at huckleberry around, North America, where it grows, what type grows there. And he's done, where are the sightings occurring? So if you ever have a question, I definitely reach out to Squatcher Metrics either on Instagram or Facebook and ask them, hey, I'm out here in New Jersey, I'm out here in New York, I'm out here wherever. Where's the huckleberry and where are the sightings at? Maybe there's something to it. Who knows?
Absolutely.
So have you ever heard too, just, to stay on topic of correlating Sasquatch and certain plants, have you ever heard any correlation about pine trees and Bigfoot? Because there's a couple of I've heard a couple of times where like there's like a little bit of overlap with Bigfoot activity and reports and areas having I think pine trees or something like that. Do you know anything about that or?
I really don't. I mean, I've heard the comparison, and it, once again, could be something to that. I mean, because right now we hypothesize as to what Sasquatch eats. I mean, for all I know, they could be eating pine needles, and if that's the case, they're everywhere, especially up here in the Pacific Northwest. You know, when I lived in Southern California, you know, the Alpine, Cuyamaca, San Bernardino area, there's a lot of pine trees down there, and that seems to be not only the areas that gets the most rain, but also areas where there's pine trees. So I haven't really made a correlation, but a lot of these sightings and encounters reports come around from areas of, you know, pine trees, even down, you know, we got ponderosa pine up here, white pine, Douglas fir, but a lot of these accounts happen around those areas, and a lot of them do happen around, you know, like kind of like old growth pine forests.
Okay. Well, I'm afraid looks like we are running a little low on time. Before we call it a night, Shane, you want to tell everyone where they could reach you? Anything else you want to, anything else you're working on that you might want to plug in? You think people will find interesting?
Yeah, I mean, you can find me on, Instagram, the usual, Twitter, Facebook. If you have any questions or anything you'd like to share, feel free to reach out to me. We do have the limitproject.com. It's kind of in construction still, but you can still reach us there. And then, of course, I do my own podcast, Monster X Radio. I've been lagging on it lately, been really busy. I just got back from a trip to San Diego and whatnot. But we'll be hitting the airways again here soon with some interesting shows. When it comes to the nest, I get a lot of heat about the nest, but they're not going anywhere anytime soon. I'm researching this through and through, no matter what the outcome is at the end of the day. I got my ideas, my hypothesis, and I could be absolutely wrong, and I'm cool with that. But they are very unique. They're very interesting, and the amount of people that are much smarter than me that have looked at these things think there's something unique and different about them. And so that's our focus. And I do want to say, a lot of times I get on these podcasts and, I know I'm kind of one of the front men for the Unlimited Project, but there's a lot of great individuals in the Unlimited Project. They do a lot of the nitty gritty hard work that are live and breathe this topic matter. And I got to give them kudos and, and say thank you, because I love working with these individuals, and they're smart and very passionate about it. And then also, I'll say this as well. There are a lot of wonderful individuals outside the Olympic Project, other groups that I think are doing fantastic, amazing stuff. And I encourage them to keep doing it, keep your heads up and be enthusiastic about it. Keep an open mind, just don't let your brain fall out. But I got to give them credit too, because, I know we're just one of many groups and individuals. I think we're working on some really unique and fun stuff, but I know other individuals and groups that are doing the same. And so I'm very enthusiastic about their endeavors, and I encourage them to, but anyways, guys, thank you so much for having me on. It's been an absolute blast. And you got a fan for life with this show. I really enjoy it.
Absolutely. Yeah, man. Thanks so much. I saw you, like I said, I saw you last year at the Coshocton, the Sasquatch Triangle. I knew I had to get you on the show. You're definitely welcome to come back on again. Maybe you can bring Derek along next time, like you said. And,
some of the other people you mentioned too. Definitely.
Oh yeah, they're great, and I learned, as much as I share, I learned so much from them. But I thank you for this open format, for allowing me to talk about something I'm passionate about.
Yeah, for sure. If you want to, so it looks like we're gonna wrap up. Shane, if you want to stick around in the, if you want to stick around backstage after we finish up. Again, Shane, I want to thank you for taking the time out of your busy schedule to join us tonight. Thank everyone else for tuning in. Chuck and I are going to be back next week, same time. We're going to have both the lads from Cryptovania back on again. So
Jason, nice.
They're going to let us know. They're going to fill us in on the high strange that's going on out in Western PA and that surrounding area. So that's definitely a show you don't want to miss. So for the CARC Universal from Behind 12 Trees, we'll say goodnight. Brendan, play us out.
You've been watching From Behind Tall Trees, a Catskill Appalachian Research Collective production. For more information on this program and others like it, remember to like, share, and subscribe to CARC Universal today. To join the conversation on our Facebook group, become a member of the Catskill Appalachian Research Collective Facebook group. CARC. Relentless.
Hey, this is Chuck Larson.